Yeah, so I'll go first in this one since you went first on the last one. Let's stick with your team. How about the New England Patriots? They have cap space. This is, I feel like, a position of need. They could use a pure edge rusher who can win one-on-one matchups. He can play defense. This makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it does. It makes a lot of sense. It makes sense for New England to go after JJ Watt. I mean, I think realistically, there's about 20 teams that should call JJ Watt, maybe 25 teams. Not New Orleans because they don't have money.
Right.
You know, I think there's a bunch of teams that should call about JJ Watt. The question is going to be is where does he want to go? And is New England a situation where he wants to go? He's talked about wanting to play for a winner and he wants to play for a good coach. Well, we have one of those two things right now because we don't know if this New England team is going to be a winner next year. But they have the great coach, obviously, and that could be a scenario that he really finds appealing.
Wow, it's so down on the Patriots and going into 2021.
I mean, this is a scenario. I'm going to talk myself into this team by August. I'm going to love the draft. I'm going
Yeah.
to love them getting Kwity Paye at 15 instead of a receiver or quarterback. I'm
Uh,
going to love them getting, a bunch of mid-tier linebackers at $5 million a year. I'm going to talk myself into this team.
yeah.
And all of a sudden they're going to have no quarterback at week one. And it's just going to be like, oh, well, they'll go 10-6.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. Yeah, it makes that's fair. And also, New England doesn't like to throw a bunch of money at a player unless they feel like they're undervalued, even with the bunch of money, like a Gilmore thing. So that might be a factor. Number two, who do you got?
Um, I just feel like the narrative for this one makes a lot of sense. I don't know how the money works for this one. I actually haven't even looked at it because they got some stuff to clear up. But the Green Bay Packers, I think, do make a lot of sense in the fact that the Smiths are very good pass rushers, but this is a team that struggled in the run throughout the year. He is an edge rusher who not only can rush the passer, but is also very good in the run game too. I just think a lot of this makes a lot of sense that he could do a lot of early down work for the Packers, do some different scenarios, and be in different places for this team, and be a very good player back home in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think that the fit makes sense, especially with the way that Watt can move everywhere in the line along with Za'Darius Smith. They both are so versatile that I think that helps. The issue is they're $11 million under the cap, or they have negative $11 million, and on top of that, they so 11 million over the cap. And on top of that, they already have a lot of money tied up in their edge rushers. I just don't know if they want to spend another 10, 12 million on another edge guy.
Yeah, that would be the toughest thing. They got to restructure some of the contracts and still figure out a way to bring back Aaron Jones and all that kind of stuff. So that's probably the unrealistic part. But if they find a way to restructure some contracts to make this work, I think the fit of this team and wanting to go to Green Bay makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and also part of it is just the way that the Green Bay Packers operate. It just seems like they're not willing to play for right now. Like they're always building for the future, and this is kind of a right now move. So maybe it'll work, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I do think it may. That is a true thing. That's always been kind of the Packers' mo. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah. Number three, how about the Buffalo Bills? They could use a JJ Watt. They could really use a JJ Watt. They're currently 1 million over the cap, so they're kind of right at the cap, but you can find ways to make that work and get the money to happen. And they're definitely a team that they would want him, and I feel like, it would be mutual. JJ Watt, of course you'd want to go play there. Clearly good coaching, and they're a team that could win it all, and this could be one of the pieces that could put them over the hump.
Yeah, I mean that does make a lot of sense. They desperately need some pass rushers. They definitely need an edge. So I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a team that I think does fit. It's just a question of, once again, is this the kind of team he wants to go to? But maybe one pass rusher is all they need to kind of keep up with Kansas City. I don't know. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but it could be a scenario where they're maybe a couple players away from competing with Kansas City and closing that gap.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. All right, number four, who do you got?
All right, so I'll go with the Baltimore Ravens here. I just think that they have some money to spend. This is a team that just constantly gets like these older players in. And listen, I think if he wants to go to a Super Bowl contender, I still think this team's really close. They haven't wowed us in the playoffs the last 2 years, but they've been able to bring in some defensive line talent who are a little bit older. So I do think JJ Watt in Baltimore does make it sense.
Yeah, no, this one makes total. I mean, again, it's a position of need. they could again, they really would like to use that. I think they know it's a position of need. They know that's something they need to upgrade, and they do have 18 million in cap space, so they can make this work. So I think that this checks all the boxes for me. I think that this would be a good move for Baltimore, and we keep waiting for Baltimore to turn the corner and become this Super Bowl team. Well, maybe this would be what finally does it.
Yeah. I mean, it would be very Baltimore too to get a guy. I know they kind of need an edge rusher still anyways, but it would be very Baltimore to bring in a guy like Watt with all their cap space and still not have a receiver to throw to.
That would be very. You are absolutely correct on that. I mean, but let's be honest. The way Baltimore works, they could. I feel like who's been the last good receiver for Baltimore? Anquan Bolden.
Yeah. I mean, he was really good though. So
yeah, sure, right. I was going to say who's ever been good, but then I'm like, oh, Bolden, got to say him. All right, number 5. This one is down this low only because I feel like they have Shaq Barrett, but I'm going to go Tampa Bay, or they have Shaq Barrett to sign. That's an option. I feel like if they can't get Barrett, a cheaper option would be J.J. Watt. And when he's your backup plan, that's pretty good. And again, I feel like he would want to go there because they just won a Super Bowl. And I also think that, they like to have their linebackers drop in coverage. Who's batted more balls down at the line than Watt? He could totally, be a drop back into coverage, because that's a very different thing than just being like a straight up coverage linebacker. So I think this fit would work. I think that obviously Shaq Barrett is the better option, but 13 million in cap space, or I think it's a little more than that. But they're up against the cap to sign everybody. But this could actually even be a cheaper option.
Yeah. No, I definitely do think it makes sense getting a guy like Watt to replace Barrett. I think the question for me will be, is Tampa going to do like basically, are they going to go through all these scenarios to try and bring back Barrett that they miss out on Watt basically? Because if they try and bring back Barrett and then all of a sudden Watt's off the table, then it's like they're kind of stuck with zoning in on Barrett this whole time.
Yeah, a lot of people in the chat now are just writing all the good receivers the Ravens have had. Okay, I get it. A bit of hyperbole there.
Someone put Hollywood, which is funny, but
yeah. Anyways, I think that makes sense. Number 6 now, last one on the draft. Who do you got?
The Browns. This is a Browns move. They love to get these free agents in here. It makes sense to have someone next to Myles Garrett that can be really good. And they're in a scenario, especially against some of these teams that we mentioned, that if they need to, they can kind of overpay a little bit and, still bring him in and, have some cap space to work with. So I think the Browns make sense.
Yeah, the only real concern I would have about the Browns, and the reason I had them at 6-2, but the only reason I had them this low is just because I think they have other issues. And, 20 million in cap, are you going to spend, half of that on an edge rusher when you already get pretty consistent? I know Olivier Vernon, who knows what his situation is right now, but I feel like Myles Garrett and just 3 guys off the street are going to get consistent pressure. So do you maybe just try to build on the back end, or do you just say, hey, Myles Garrett and J.J. Watt, we don't need that much good in the secondary because we can just get consistent pressure? It's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's probably, if they did do this, that would be their scenario, is like, who cares about second quarter? Who cares if Robert Jackson's playing there? We have J.J. Watt and Myles Garrett that's going to make up for it. I still think they should address secondary first and then their other edge rushers. But I do think that's a scenario where they'd have to look at it and think, what are they going to do?
Yeah, I think that makes sense too. So those are our 6. Who are some honorable mentions you had?
I had the Pittsburgh Steelers, just because, brother, makes sense. They love edge rushers. The Denver Broncos are interesting to me. They're another team that has money that they could do it. Not to mention this Von Miller thing is kind of interesting. So I think that would be an interesting team to look at. Another team that doesn't necessarily need it but could is the LA Chargers, if they want to change up some things on the defensive line. And then, of course, the Dallas Cowboys, because this is the most Cowboys move ever, is to not address any of their actual needs and get J.J. Watt.
Throw $100 million at J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers, like, the only reason it makes sense is because he has 2 brothers that play for the Steelers, right? Like, there's no other, like, the Steelers have Bud Dupree, TJ Watt, and Alex Highsmith on their team. 3 really good edge rushers. They're negative $26 million in the cap right now, and we're going to go out and spend $10 million on JJ Watt. Like, it's just the brothers thing, right?
It pretty much is, yeah. So, and this is like their position. This is this and wide receiver is something that they love. Edge rushers and wide receivers. So I understand it, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I also have the Colts just because of the cap space. And then the two teams, Seahawks and Titans. Seahawks have 4 million, Titans have -2. Both of those teams could use a good edge rusher and are competitive, so Watt might want to go there.
Yeah. The Seahawks is a tough one because they don't have a ton of cap space, like you mentioned. Not to mention that $4 million in cap space. I believe they have like 45, 46 players signed or something like that. It's not a lot. Not to mention that with Russell Wilson's conversations, they're going to have to get offensive line help.